There are stories too old to be written, and too sacred to be spoken aloud. Stories that drift on the wind like the final breath of the forgotten. In the dim corners of temples, deep in the jungles of Thailand, Japan, and Indonesia, they whisper. Of spirits that never crossed over. Of drums that echo where no hand strikes. Of women who died with their secrets sealed in silence, and now return to speak. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where ancient rituals, cursed spirits, and unspeakable grief awaken in the dead of night, where every tale you hear is a shadow of what really happened. In a forgotten village nestled high in the Thai mountains, there is a drum, old, stained, sealed away behind the altar of a crumbling temple. They say it was made from the skin of a woman who died with her child still inside her. They say she took her own life, but no one ever found her soul. And they say, on moonless nights, if you strike that drum, she will hear you, she will come, and she will not come alone. This is the story of Pra Chan, a young monk who broke the sacred silence, who heard her whispers in the rain, and who learned too late that some spirits do not want to be saved, they want to be remembered. This is the drum that calls the dead.
The rain came in waves that night, not gentle or cleansing, but angry, as though the sky itself had grown tired of the silence. In the hills of northern Thailand, where roads are little more than muddy scars carved through the jungle, the village of Bon Hua Tung lay soaked beneath black clouds. There were no tourists here, no streetlights, just old wooden homes raised on stilts, whispers of prayers floating in candlelight, and the low chant of monks echoing from the monastery perched above the trees. The monastery had stood for over a century. Its teakwood walls were blackened from time and incense. Its temple bell no longer rang, and beneath its prayer hall was a door that no one spoke of, sealed with string, marked with red, and watched by the eyes of the dead. Pra Chan had never been inside that room, not once, not even when he cleaned the floor beside it every day. He had only been a monk for 2 years, 23, soft-spoken, with gentle eyes and a voice that trembled when he chanted the sutras. Born in Chiang Rai, orphaned young, he came to Ban Hua Tung seeking peace. What he found instead was a rule that everyone obeyed without question. Do not touch the drum. The drum sat behind the sealed door. No one ever mentioned its name, but every monk in the monastery knew its shape, large, blood-colored, bound in cracked rope and covered with centuries of dust. It leaned in the shadows like a sleeping thing, its surface scarred, its silence heavy. The oldest monk, Pra Arun, warned that even being near it during the wrong hour could draw attention from things best left alone. Pra Chan had believed him until the night the stranger died. The man was found tangled in barbed wire at the edge of the forest. His body was torn open in places, but there were no signs of a struggle. No one knew who he was. No ID, no phone, no relatives. His skin was pale, already turning gray from the mountain cold, but his face looked peaceful, too peaceful. "It's not a normal death," said the village headman, his voice low with unease. "A wandering spirit or a cursed one." The villagers gathered at the temple for guidance. In Thai tradition, those who die unnaturally, suicide, murder, or accident, do not pass peacefully into the next life. They become Tai Hong, vengeful ghosts tied to the pain of their last breath. And when one dies in a village like Ban Hoa Tung, rituals must be performed immediately, or the spirit will linger. "It's the drum, then," muttered an old woman in the crowd. "You must call him home." All eyes turned to Pra Arun. The elder monk, frail and blind in one eye, nodded solemnly. "We will pray. We will light the path, but the drum must remain silent." Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through banana leaves. "But without the drum, how will the spirit leave?" Pra Arun lifted a trembling hand. Because the last time it was used, someone didn't. That night, the ritual began. Pra Chan lit the incense. His hands trembled as he knelt beside the stranger's body, now wrapped in white linen and placed before the Buddha statue. The air was heavy with smoke, the murmured chants of the monks slow and sorrowful. But in the silence between prayers, Pra Chan kept glancing toward the sealed door beneath the altar. He could feel something pulsing behind it. Not sound exactly, something more like pressure, as though the drum itself was aware of the ritual and wanted to join in. He tried to shake the feeling. He poured water on the offering bowl. He bowed 3 times, but when he closed his eyes, he swore he heard it, a single beat, soft, dull, like a hand striking wet skin. He looked up. The others hadn't noticed. After the villagers left and the candles burned low, Pra Arun placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't ever go near that room," the old monk said, his voice no louder than a breath. "That drum is not for you. It was sealed for a reason." Pra Chan bowed low. "Yes, Luanpo." But even as he said the words, his mind drifted to the sound he thought he'd heard. One beat. In the dark. Later that night, long after the others had fallen asleep, Pra Chan sat alone in the prayer hall. The wind howled outside, dragging bamboo chimes against the rafters. Lightning flashed over the jungle. He couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to the body, to the eyes of the dead man, open until the very end, to the old stories his grandmother used to tell about souls that drifted if they weren't called back. The drum could call them. That's what the elders believed, right? One strike, one sound, that's all it took to open the path. But the elder monks were too afraid. They let spirits wander, unanchored, unblessed. And Pra Chan, he wanted to help. He truly did. With quiet steps, he rose and padded barefoot across the cold floor. The door to the sealed room stood just behind the altar, covered in red string, nailed shut, marked with symbols that made his skin crawl. But the lock was old. The wood was soft. He lit a candle. He whispered a prayer. Then he pulled. The door creaked open like something exhaling after a long sleep. Inside, the air was dry and still. The drum sat in the center of the room, as large as a man, slumped against the wall like an animal at rest. Its skin was dark, reddish, cracked with age. A faint smell of blood and rot hung in the air. Pra Chan knelt before it. He touched its surface. It was warm. Something deep in his stomach told him to leave, to run, to close the door and never return. But his hand was already rising. And before he could stop himself, he struck the drum. One beat. Low. Echoing. Not loud, but final, like a distant gong underwater. He waited. At first, nothing happened. Then, somewhere in the distance, the wind stopped. The jungle fell quiet, and outside the temple, beyond the trees, behind the prayer flags fluttering in the dark, a voice whispered his name. Chan. He stumbled backward, heart pounding, candle flickering in his grip. The voice wasn't angry, it wasn't loud, it was soft, sad even. But it was real. He ran from the room and sealed the door again, wrapping the string so tight his fingers bled. He didn't sleep that night. And when dawn came, the birds didn't sing. The village dogs wouldn't stop barking. And under the floorboards of the temple, the drum beat once more. The morning light came slow and weak, like a dying candle trying to survive the wind. Mist clung to the temple steps. The jungle steamed from the night's rain, releasing the heavy smell of wet earth and decay. Prachan had not slept. His hands still trembled from what he'd done. He had broken a vow, not one written in scripture, but older, carved into the bones of the monastery itself. He had played the forbidden drum. And now the silence after the sound felt wrong. It wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. When he joined the morning alms round, the villagers noticed. "Prachan," said an old woman, pressing sticky rice into his bowl. "You look pale, child. Did you see the spirit last night?" He forced a smile. "No, May." "Strange," she muttered, glancing toward the forest. "My daughter heard footsteps outside the house, like someone walking around the house, but when she looked, no one." The woman crossed herself 3 times and whispered a short blessing. He bowed and walked on, the sound of her words lingering behind him. At the base of the hill, a group of children were playing near the pond. When they saw him, they stopped and stared. One little boy pointed at his robe. "Luang Pra, there's dirt," he said. Prachan looked down. The hem of his saffron robe was streaked with dark brown stains. Mud, perhaps, or blood. He didn't remember kneeling on the ground the night before. But he hadn't he, when he heard the voice? He tightened his bowl strap and kept walking. That night, the air turned colder than it should have. The temple lanterns flickered, their flames bending toward the sealed door, as though drawn to something behind it. The elder monks were asleep. Only Prachan remained awake, sitting cross-legged near the Buddha statue, his breath shallow. He couldn't stop thinking about the voice, the way it had whispered his name, not like a threat, but a plea, like someone lonely. He lit 3 sticks of incense, their smoke curling upward like gray serpents. And in the hush between heartbeats, he heard it again. A soft thump, deep and wet. Then another, faint from beneath the floor. The drum. He froze. It was impossible. He had locked that door himself. Still, the rhythm grew stronger, slow, deliberate, pulsing like the heart of something buried alive. Thumb, thumb, thumb. Prachan rose to his feet. The air had changed. It carried the scent of iron and flowers, sweet and rotten at once. And then she appeared. At first, she was only a shape, white against the dark, swaying like mist above the wooden floor.
but when the candlelight flickered, it revealed a woman's form. Her long hair clung to her shoulders, wet as if she had just stepped from the rain. Her head hung low. Her face was hidden. She stood beside the altar, silent. "Who are you?" Prachan whispered. The woman lifted her chin slightly. Her neck was bruised. Around her throat was the mark of a rope. Prachan stumbled backward. You are not real," he breathed. "You are a vision, a test." The woman's lips moved, but no sound came. Only when she raised her hand, pointing toward the sealed door, did he understand. The drum. He followed her gaze. She wanted him to play it again. He fled the prayer hall, his feet bare on the cold stone, his breath clouding in the night. Outside, the world was eerily quiet. Even the insects were still. He knelt beneath the Bodhi tree, hands clasped, and began to chant, the words tumbling over each other. "May all beings be free from suffering. May the restless find rest. May the lost find peace." But the wind answered with a whisper, "Chan." He opened his eyes. She was standing across the courtyard now, near the monks' quarters. The light from his candle bent toward her like a flower leaning toward the sun. Her voice reached him as a sigh. "You called me." And she vanished. At dawn, Pra Arun found him asleep beneath the Bodhi tree. "Child," the old monk said gently, shaking his shoulder, "you should not sleep outside. The night holds things that listen." Prachan blinked awake. "Luang Po, have you ever heard it?" "Heard what?" "The drum." The old monk's face hardened. "It does not play unless someone strikes it." "But what if it strikes itself?" "That would mean someone has awakened what sleeps inside. Someone foolish, someone who does not understand." Prachan swallowed hard. "What is inside it, Luang Po?" The elder's cloudy eyes seemed to dim. "It is not a what, it is a who." The following nights grew heavier, thicker. The jungle around the monastery seemed to press closer, as if the trees themselves were listening. Villagers began to complain of strange things. Goats found dead with their necks twisted. Children talking to invisible friends. A faint drumming sound echoing through the rice fields just before dawn. One woman claimed she saw a figure in white standing on the temple roof during the storm. The monks dismissed it as rumor. Prachan knew better. Every night he dreamed of her, the woman beneath the Bodhi tree, hair tangled, eyes hollow. Every dream ended the same way. She would whisper his name, and her voice would become a drumbeat. On the 7th night, the storm returned. Rain lashed the rooftops, thunder cracking like bones in the sky. The temple flooded with shadows, and the wind howled through the windows like a chant gone wrong. Prachan woke to the sound of footsteps. He sat up in the dark. The footsteps came from the hall outside, soft, wet, dragging. He reached for his candle, but it had gone out. The footsteps stopped. Then a whisper. "Play it again." The voice came from the sealed room. He rose, trembling. His robe clung to his skin. "No, I should not. You already did. That was a mistake. Mistakes cannot be undone. His throat tightened. Who are you? Silence. Then, very faintly, knock. The candle reignited on its own. Her name drifted through his mind like smoke. Knock. He didn't know it, yet it felt familiar. The ropes around the door began to shift, not snapping, not breaking, just loosening, as if something beneath them was breathing. He took a step back, but his hands moved forward. He didn't want to. He couldn't stop. The same force that made him strike the drum once before was moving through him again, slow, inevitable, like being pulled by the tide. He reached for the door. He felt heat on the wood, and behind it the steady thumb of something alive. He whispered a single prayer. Then he struck it again. The sound was deeper this time, echoing through the hall like thunder trapped under water. And the moment it rang out, the storm outside stopped. The wind froze mid-howl. The rain hung in the air like silver threads. The silence was complete. And then she stepped through the door. Her skin glistened like wax, her eyes dark pools that reflected no light. The rope mark around her throat looked fresh now, red and raw. Prachan fell to his knees. Why are you here? She tilted her head, almost curious. You called me. I didn't mean to. No one ever does. Her voice was both inside his ears and inside his mind, echoing like the hum of the drum. They sealed me away, she said. They told the world I was cursed, but I was wronged. She moved closer. He could see the tear in her belly, faint like a scar that refused to heal. They buried me beneath this temple. They used my skin to make the drum. Prachan's breath hitched. That's not possible. The monks of old did it to keep my child quiet, but I still hear him. I hear his heart every time the drum beats. Her eyes glimmered with sorrow. Help me, Chan. Free me. He didn't remember collapsing, only waking later with his head against the cold floor and the candle melted into a pool beside him. The sealed door was closed again. The ropes were tight, but the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and from somewhere deep within the wood, the drum whispered, thumb, thumb, thumb. Soft, faint, like the heartbeat of something waiting to be born. By the third week, the monastery no longer felt like a place of peace. The rhythm of daily life, the chants, the meals, the sweeping of leaves in the courtyard continued, but something had shifted. The air hung heavier, like breath held too long. The shadows fell deeper in the corners, and the monks had begun to speak in shorter sentences, their voices edged with unease. It wasn't just the drum beats at night. It was the feeling, like being watched. Prachan noticed it most clearly when alone. In the bathhouse, the water would ripple as if someone had stepped in behind him. In the hallways, cold air brushed his neck when no wind stirred. And in the prayer room, during the morning chants, he often saw flickers of white from the corner of his eye. Each time he turned to look, there was nothing, just the flickering candlelight and the distant thump of something beating softly through the wooden floors. The villagers, too, had started to whisper. "Someone's playing the drum. I heard it again last night, 3 times, like a warning." "My baby cried for hours," said another, "but when I picked her up, she was smiling and looking at the ceiling, like she saw something." There was talk of a woman in white. She had been seen near the rice paddies, near the temple pond, even, someone swore, walking barefoot across the roof of the monastery under the moonlight. But no footprints were ever found. Pra Arun tightened the ritual boundaries. Salt was poured across doorways. Blessed cords were tied around window frames. The monks recited protective sutras late into the night. But still, the presence remained. One evening, after meditation, Pra-Chan lingered alone in the prayer hall. The others had retired, the candles burned low, and outside the jungle hissed with the sound of insects and the distant screech of a night bird. He sat before the Buddha statue, palms open, breath steady. He told himself he would not listen, but his ears strained for it anyway. The soft beat, the whisper. It came, not from beneath the floor this time, but from the walls. Not words exactly, just murmurs. A weeping sound, like someone repeating the same sentence again and again, too soft to understand. Pra-Chan pressed his hand to the wall beside him. It was warm. He stepped back. Then came a whisper, clear this time, right beside his ear. "They buried me beneath your prayers." He turned, and she was there, the woman in white. But now he could see her face, pale, hollow, beautiful even, but wrong. Her eyes were too wide. Her mouth never moved when she spoke. Her feet didn't touch the ground. And in her arms, she cradled something wrapped in linen, small, unmoving. Pra-Chan's voice cracked. "Is it a baby?" She looked down at the bundle. He never cried, not once. Tears welled in her dark eyes. They said he was cursed. They said we both were. Pra-Chan stepped closer, but the shadows pulled away from her like a tide fleeing from shore. "Why were you sealed?" he asked softly. She looked up, and this time her mouth did move. "Because I refuse to die quietly." That night, the Bodhi tree shed its leaves, out of season, all at once. The monks found them scattered across the temple yard like a funeral shroud. Pra-Arun sat with the elders, lips pursed tight in thought. "This is a warning. The spirit is awakening." One of the younger monks whispered, "Should we perform a cleansing?" "No," he said, "not yet. Cleansing can drive away the gentle ones, but this is not gentle." Pra-Chan said nothing. He could still feel her presence lingering in his chest, like incense that refused to fade. The next morning, he returned to the sealed room. The ropes around the door had frayed, not broken, just unwound, as if worn from within. He didn't open it, he dared not, but he knelt beside the threshold and whispered, "Knock, is that your name?" The wood creaked. A breath, perhaps, or something deeper. Then, faintly, her voice answered, "You remember." After that, the hauntings grew bolder. A monk awoke to find his bed soaked through as if submerged in water. Another collapsed in prayer, eyes rolling back, whispering the name "Knock" again and again. A woman's face in a well looking up at her from beneath the surface. When she screamed and ran, the water rose on its own, overflowing without rain. The village dogs stopped barking. They simply stared at the temple, tails low, eyes wide, waiting. Pra-Chan became a ghost among the living. He ate less, slept in bursts, and when he did sleep, his dreams were filled with images he could not explain. A monk slamming the drum with both fists while screaming. A woman giving birth alone in the rain. A baby, silent, eyes open but lifeless. The sound of the drum, not played with hands, but with teeth. He woke one night with blood on his fingertips, not his own, and a faint echo in his ear. They lied to you, Chan. They lied to all of you. He returned to Pra Arun. Tell me the truth, he demanded, his voice low but firm. Who was Nok? His eyes narrowed. That name has not been spoken here in decades. But it's in the walls, in the floor, in the drum. You don't understand what you're inviting. Pra Chan knelt. Then help me understand. There was a long silence, and then with a sigh as heavy as his robes, he whispered, She was one of us. A nun? No, he said, before that, before even I arrived. She was taken in, pregnant, unwed. The village did not accept her, so the monastery did. But her child was born strange, silent, still. He looked away. Some believed she brought a curse. Others said the child's father had died violently and his spirit poisoned the womb. Either way, fear spread. And then she hanged herself from the Bodhi tree on temple ground. Pra Chan's chest tightened. Then they buried her beneath the temple, Pra Arun continued. But strange things began to happen. Fires, miscarriages, deaths. He paused. And so they sealed her soul in the drum, made from her skin, bound by forbidden rites. Pra Chan could barely speak. That's not a ritual. That's cruelty. It was fear masquerading as piety, and now it returns. That night, Pra Chan sat beneath the Bodhi tree, alone. He no longer feared the voice. He waited for it. And when the wind stirred the leaves, he heard her once more. You see now, she said, why I still walk. He turned toward the temple. The walls pulsed faintly. The wood whispered. And for the first time, he felt it fully. The monastery itself was haunted, not just by Nok, but by everything done in her name. And the drum was still beating, calling, waiting. The rain had returned, but softer now, falling like tears instead of fists. It pattered on the roof tiles of the monastery as Fra Arun lit a single candle in the archive room, his hands trembling slightly. The scent of old paper and aged wood filled the small chamber. On the floor between them sat Fra Chan, kneeling with eyes wide, heart already burdened with what he suspected but not yet fully understood. The elder monk sat with a weary breath, the light casting deep shadows across the lines of his face. She was not called Nok when she arrived. That name came later. It means bird in Thai. But she had another name, one that was erased from our records. He reached into a cloth-wrapped bundle and retrieved an old scroll. It was yellowed and stiff with age, the ink faded, almost scrubbed. Only 3 words remained visible. Tai Hong Tong Klom. Fra Chan felt a chill run through him. The worst kind, Arun whispered. You know what it means. He did. Every Thai child knew. A woman who dies while pregnant, especially by her own hand, becomes a spirit of unbearable power. driven by the pain of two deaths in one breath, hers and the unborn child's. These ghosts are feared not just because they haunt, but because they do not forget. She came here in the monsoon season, many years ago, before I was ordained, alone, thin, soaked in blood. Fra Chan's breath caught. She had already given birth? No, said the elder. She was in labor, early. The villagers refused to take her in. Even the midwives crossed themselves and closed their doors. They said she was cursed, that the baby's father had died in a fire, and that she carried his anger. He paused. His hands shook slightly as he rolled the scroll back into its cloth. She delivered the child herself, alone, beneath the Bodhi tree. Fra Chan closed his eyes. He could already see it. The rain, the mud, the pale woman screaming beneath the sacred leaves, alone, bleeding, betrayed. And the child? He asked. Stillborn. No cries, no breath. But the body had no marks of death, eyes open, skin warm, as if waiting. He looked away. They say she wrapped the baby in her robe and carried him up to the altar, placed him before the Buddha statue, and then she hung herself from the tree. Silence filled the room like smoke. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence left when something sacred is broken. Fra Chan whispered, "Why didn't the monks bless her? Give her a proper cremation?" Because fear is stronger than mercy. They believed her death would poison the land, that if she were burned, the smoke would carry the curse into the sky. They buried her, and when that didn't stop the hauntings, Fra Chan finished, voice hollow, they made the drum. The elder nodded. From her skin, her blood sealed inside. They believed that if her spirit was trapped in something that could call the dead, it would keep her busy, that it would give her a role. He laughed bitterly. A ghost as an instrument, a soul reduced to ritual. Fra Chan felt nausea rising in his throat. How could they? It was another generation, Arun said, voice almost apologetic. A harsher time, and perhaps they believed they were protecting the village. But they didn't seal her, Fra Chan said slowly. They bound her. That's different. Yes, whispered Arun. She was never laid at rest. She was made a servant to the monastery, used, and then forgotten. That night, Fra Chan returned to the Bodhi tree. It stood quiet in the moonlight, its branches heavy with rain. The roots curled into the earth like sleeping serpents. He knelt before it, as she once had. Knock, I know your story now. A wind passed through the leaves, and her voice followed. Now you see why I stayed. They turned my sorrow into a tool, but I remember every heartbeat, even the ones that never came. He rose and made his way to the prayer hall. The sealed door throbbed with heat as he passed. And in the walls, in the beams, in the floorboards, he heard her whisper, "Free me. Let me weep the way I could not. Let me burn." In the heart of the monastery courtyard, where the candlelight no longer reached, Pra Chun began to bring her offerings. He did not tell the other monks. He did not speak her name aloud. But every night, just after the final prayer, he would return to the old stone shrine behind the Bodhi tree, a moss-covered altar long forgotten, once used for ancestral offerings, but now cracked and overgrown. There, in silence, he left a bowl of steamed jasmine rice, a handful of marigold petals, and once a small cloth-wrapped bundle of white silk. Inside the silk, a tiny rattle carved from bamboo. He did not know why he offered it, only that he felt her watching, and that somewhere, beneath the roots, behind the walls, her child still waited. The first night he made an offering, the jungle fell quiet. No insects, no frogs, no wind. Only the crackling of incense and the sound of rice gently settling in the bowl. He bowed low, and when he rose, the offering was gone. Not disturbed, not scattered, gone as if absorbed into the earth itself. From that night onward, she began to appear more often, not in full form, not always near the shrine. Sometimes it was a shadow in the reflection of the water basin. Sometimes it was the scent of wet jasmine in his room. Once he awoke to find strands of long black hair on his pillow, still damp. She never spoke unless he prayed, but when he did, her voice came clearly, like breath through cracked wood. You see me now. You feed the dead like the living. You remember me. Pra-Chan did not tell her he was afraid. She already knew. But he told her he was sorry, and that, somehow, seemed to matter. Yet while her voice softened, the village began to suffer. An elderly woman slipped in the rain and broke her hip. 2 children became feverish and would not speak for days. 3 dogs were found dead near the monastery steps, curled in a circle, as if they'd been guarding something or waiting for something to come. Whispers spread again. She's back, they said. They say the monk, the young one, he wakes her. Maybe he's possessed. One night, a drunken villager came to the temple gate, shouting through the rain, "Let her stay dead! She's not yours to pity, monk! She took her own life! Let the jungle have her!" The next morning, that man's tongue was found nailed to a tree. He survived, but he no longer spoke. Inside the temple, the tension grew unbearable. Pra-Arun gathered the monks in the meditation hall. "We are not safe," he said. "The seal has weakened." Another monk, younger than Arun, but still elder to Pra-Chan, asked, "Should we perform the water rite?" Arun shook his head. "No, she is not just a ghost. She is a memory with teeth. If we try to drive her out, she may tear the temple down." The other monks fell silent, but Pra-Chan looked up. "There may be another way," he said. They turned to him surprised. Until now he had said little. "We cannot unmake the past, but what if we acknowledged it? What if we honored her instead of fearing her?" One of the senior monks scowled. "You speak of honoring a spirit that cursed this land." Pra-Chan's voice did not rise, but it held something new, a gravity that came not from boldness, but from proximity to something unseen. "She was not the curse. She was cursed," he said. That night he made another offering, this time not food. He knelt beneath the Bodhi tree and placed a single monk's robe, carefully folded. "My vow," he whispered, "I give you what they would not. Dignity." The tree creaked above him. Then silence. Then her voice. "You are not like them. You remember me as a woman, not just a warning. But not all spirits want remembrance. Some want retribution. The village shaman, a man named Bunmi, came to the temple the next day. He had been called by the villagers, desperate to stop the illness and strange dreams plaguing their homes. He wore bells around his ankles and a crown of feathers. He carried a wooden staff carved with the faces of weeping women. He knelt before the elders and declared, "I see a restless one beneath your soil, and she is gathering strength." Pra Arun nodded. "We know." Bunmi fixed his gaze at Pra Chun. "You fed her." Pra Chun bowed. "Yes." "You've heard her voice." "Yes." The shaman's jaw tensed. "Then you are already part of her." That night, Bunmi conducted a ritual in the forest, burning herbs, summoning protection. But the smoke turned black. The wind rose suddenly. And when he returned to the village, his eyes were red, as though he'd wept through the ritual. "She doesn't want peace," he said. "She wants to be felt. She wants her death to mean something." The next morning, the shrine behind the Bodhi tree was gone. Not desecrated, not destroyed, gone. The earth where it stood was flat and bare. No flowers, no incense ash, no sign it had ever been there. And yet beneath the soil, Pra Chun felt warmth, as if something had moved underneath, claiming it. That night, the drums returned, but no one had played them. No hands touched the ropes. No monk entered the sealed room. Yet from within the temple walls came the steady, hollow beat. Tum, tum, tum. Soft, steady, insistent. And with each strike, the windows of the temple rattled. The jungle bent toward the monastery. And Nock's voice rose, no longer whispering. Now it called, "You fed me. Now let me eat." The storm returned without warning. Clouds bled across the sky like ink spilled into water. Thunder did not roar, it rumbled low and long, like something waking up underground. The rain came in slanted sheets, sharp and relentless, drumming across the rooftops like 1,000 skeletal fingers. Prachan sat alone in the main prayer hall, the candles long since extinguished, the lanterns swaying in the wind. He did not flinch as lightning cracked the sky open above the Bodhi tree. He did not stir when the other monks ran past him, voices tight with concern, ordering doors to be shut and windows latched. He was listening, because in the heart of the rain, beneath the wind and thunder, she was speaking again. "I waited for the rain," her voice murmured, "because the rain remembers." Prachan turned his head slowly. She stood just outside the temple threshold, her hair soaking wet, clinging to her face like black lace. Her white dress, once tattered, now shimmered as if woven from mist itself. She did not step inside. She never did. Spirits tied to violent death often could not pass thresholds uninvited. But her voice reached across stone, air, and silence like it was born from inside his lungs. "Do you know what they told me when I screamed?" she asked. "Nothing, not a word. They let me die in silence and then used me to quiet others." Prachan knelt, not out of fear, but reverence. "I saw the records," he said softly. "I know what they did to you." Her gaze didn't shift. She blinked slowly like someone surfacing from deep water. "They took my voice," she whispered, "and then they gave it to a drum. But the drum only beats when others want it to, not when I do." Another flash of lightning illuminated the interior of the prayer hall. For the briefest second, her reflection appeared in every polished surface, in the altar's gold trim, in the oil basin, in the still water gathered in the corners of the floor. And in each reflection, she held something different. In one, a child. In another, a blade. In another, the drum itself, bleeding from the center. Prachan felt his skin crawl. He looked away. "What do you want?" she said. "To be burned, to be freed, but not alone." He woke hours later to find himself soaked, still kneeling. The storm passed. The rain had stopped so suddenly it left the air stunned. He looked toward the open temple doors. The floor was dry. Only he had been rained on. In the days that followed, her voice did not leave him. It came in dreams, in prayer, in silence. Even during alms rounds, as he walked barefoot through the village, he heard her voice in the rush of wind through sugarcane. "Do they see you as one of them? Or are you still an outsider, like me?" He tried to speak to Pra Arun again, but the old monk had fallen ill. He lay in his quarters, skin pale, lips dry. Some said it was fever. Prachan knew better. Nok was withdrawing mercy. The temple had ignored her death. It had twisted her into an object. And now she was reclaiming the silence that had smothered her, one soul at a time. On the third night after the storm, Prachan returned to the sealed room. The ropes had loosened again, unraveled in perfect spirals. The door creaked open not with resistance, but reluctance, like it knew it had failed to protect what lay inside. The drum sat in the center, still, watching, waiting. He approached it slowly, his footsteps muffled by the woven mat. He knelt before it, placed his palms on its surface. It felt warm again, alive. He pressed his forehead against it and whispered, "Why me?" And this time the drum answered, not with sound, with memory. In a rush of air and weightless vertigo, he was no longer in the temple. He was in the past, kneeling beneath the Bodhi tree. The leaves above were green and full, the ground beneath him was soft with moss, and Nook stood before him, not a ghost now, but fully alive. Her belly round, her eyes wild, her dress soaked with blood and rain. She screamed, not in fear, but in refusal. "You will not take him," she shouted to someone behind him. "He is mine. His father may be dead, but his spirit is still here. I feel him." A monk approached. Prachan didn't recognize the face, but the robe was unmistakable. "You have brought sorrow into a sacred place. The land will reject your grief. Leave." Nok fell to her knees, weeping. "I have nowhere to go." "Then the jungle will take you." And it did. The vision snapped back. Prachan gasped, palm still on the drum, body cold. Now he understood. She had not cursed the temple. The temple had cursed itself. He began to weep, silently, beside the drum. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You were right." Behind him, a breeze stirred the candle flame. Her voice followed. "Then help me die properly. Burn the drum, bury my child, and speak my name in full." He bowed low, forehead to the wood. "I will." And as he rose to leave the chamber, he noticed, For the first time, there was blood on the floor beneath the drum. Fresh, warm, dripping in time with a heartbeat that wasn't his. The change began slowly, too slow for most to notice. Prachan still wore his saffron robes. He still walked the alms path, still bowed 3 times before the altar each morning, still swept the temple floors with the same quiet grace. But something was missing from his eyes, and something else had taken its place. A heaviness, a vacancy, a depth that did not reflect light. It was the novices who noticed first. "Prachan doesn't blink when he prays anymore," one whispered. "I saw him in the yard at midnight," said another. "He was standing still, looking at the Bodhi tree, like he was listening to someone." Even Pra Arun, now confined to his bed, felt it. "The boy is thinning, not in body, in spirit. Something is eating him from the inside." The other monks dismissed it as exhaustion, but when they passed Prachan in the hall, they averted their gaze, because sometimes his shadow moved the wrong way. In the shrine room, things began to shift on their own. The Buddha statue tilted, a mirror cracked, the floor beneath the drum grew damp, even in dry weather, and across one entire wall, drawn in white chalk that none claimed to have touched, appeared a circle, a wide, uneven ring. Inside it, 3 handprints, 2 large, 2 small. Prachan stared at it for a long time before he realized they were his hands, and hers, and the child's. He stopped speaking to the others. He no longer ate with the Sangha. He took his meals in silence beneath the Bodhi tree, sometimes placing a second bowl beside him, never touching it, never explaining. At night, he sat in the sealed room for hours, though no one dared ask how he entered. One morning, a novice found him asleep there, his head resting on the drum, arms wrapped around it like a child with a toy. When he awoke, Prachan's eyes were open and full of tears, but he did not remember how he got there, or why his lips were stained red. The village grew uneasy. More deaths. A fisherman drowned in knee-deep water. A pregnant woman miscarried without warning. A baby, days old, simply stopped breathing in its sleep. And every time, the monks found petals of jasmine near the bodies, or drumbeats heard the night before. 3, always 3. The villagers stopped visiting the temple. They left offerings at the edge of the forest instead, and they spoke Nok's name again, not as a ghost, but as a goddess, a hungry one, an old one, a mother wronged. Inside the temple, the air changed. The scent of incense was overtaken by iron. Doors opened when no wind blew. Flames danced without heat, and sometimes, very faintly, a baby cried. But there were no children, only the echo. Prachan began to draw symbols in his cell, not from scripture, from memory. Circles, threads, spirals, the kinds of symbols found in burial cloths and exorcisms, but altered, twisted, as if rewritten by someone who knew the other side. He carved them into his wooden pillow, into the underside of the shrine tables, into the back of his own robes. One night, a monk entered his room and found Pra-Chan standing perfectly still before the window, eyes closed, muttering in a language that wasn't Pali. When the monk touched his shoulder, Pra-Chan turned and said, "She sees through me now. I don't dream anymore. She does." He began to speak of her like a living person. "Nok likes rain more than sun. She's afraid of bells. She misses her child's heartbeat." When asked who he meant, he only smiled and said, "The one who listens, the one you buried but never silenced." The temple began to crack, literally. The meditation hall developed a fracture down the center beam. The floor near the sealed room sagged. Snakes, small and pale, began appearing near the water basin. One monk claimed he saw his own reflection blink without him. Pra-Arun, now pale as bone, called for Pra-Chan. He came to the old monk's bedside and knelt. "You've gone too far," Arun said, his voice little more than breath. "She's not speaking to you. She's inside you now." Pra-Chan said nothing, but his eyes, they flickered. And for a second, just a second, Pra-Arun saw a second face overlapping his own, not a man's, a woman's, wet, hollow-eyed, smiling faintly. Later that night, Pra-Chan looked into the temple mirror. He raised a candle, watched his own face, then asked aloud, "Am I still me?" From behind him, her voice whispered, "You are more." The temple no longer breathed peace. It exhaled dread. Every tile, every wooden beam, every crack in the gold-leafed Buddha statue seemed to pulse with something unseen, something waiting, something waking. It had begun. The haunting was no longer confined to Pra-Chan. It had spread, like smoke through a sealed house. Monks stopped chanting, not because they forgot the words, because when they did chant, someone else joined in. A voice, low and wet, layered beneath theirs. Not quite male, not fully female. A voice echoing from inside the temple walls. Pra-Arun, once the calm center of their world, now lay shriveled on his mat, refusing food, whispering only one phrase again and again. "She's not outside anymore. She's underneath us." No one dared ask what he meant, but they began to walk more softly, to pray more quickly, to sleep in pairs, and always, always with one eye open. It was the bell that broke next. One morning, a novice rang the ancient bronze bell to signal the start of morning alms. It gave a high-pitched scream instead of a chime, a sound like metal tearing flesh. Then it cracked down the center, a jagged wound that dripped with something black. The novice fainted. When he awoke, he said only one thing. She was inside the bell. Then came the fire. It started in the meditation hall. No one saw how, no candles were lit, no oil lamps had fallen, but within seconds, the center of the floor erupted into a column of flame. Monks ran to extinguish it, pouring blessed water, reciting protective chants. The fire shrieked in return, not the roar of burning wood, but a howl a woman's howl, long, broken, furious. And when the fire finally died down, it left behind not ash, but footprints, small, bare, bloody, leading from the center of the room, directly toward the sealed door. The elders could no longer ignore it. Prachan was summoned. They sat him in the center of the cracked meditation hall, robes stained with ash, faces tight with fear and confusion. "You have brought this," one said, not unkindly, but with trembling certainty. "You've become a bridge for her." Prachan didn't argue. He only nodded. "I know." "What does she want?" another asked. He looked up. "She wants justice." The room fell silent. "Then let us give it to her," a monk whispered. "Let us perform a cleansing, a severing." But Prachan's voice turned sharp. "If you try to cast her out, she will not leave. She will devour what remains. She does not want banishment. She wants acknowledgement. She wants her story spoken where it was once silenced." But fear is louder than reason. The monks prepared the ritual anyway. It would take place at midnight, a full severing rite passed down through centuries, forbidden in many temples, risky even for benign spirits. For a Thai Hong Tong Krom, it was like ripping a live wire from a flooded wall. That night, the monks gathered in a circle around the sealed drum room. Salt rings were laid. Offerings of black sesame, broken combs, and burned rice, traditional tokens to confuse or distract female ghosts, were scattered at every threshold. The chanting began. Prachan was not allowed to join. They locked him in the old library. He did not fight. He simply sat on the cold floor, eyes closed, and whispered to the dark, "Forgive them." And in return, he heard her whisper back, "I won't." The ritual began. The chants rose. The air thickened. Then, screams. One monk collapsed, clutching his chest. Another fell backward, eyes rolled white, blood leaking from his ears. The salt line erupted in flame. The circle shattered. And then she walked through the fire. Knock, but not as she had appeared before. Now she was full. Her dress billowed as if underwater. Her eyes glowed. Her feet left burn marks on the floor with every step. And in her arms she carried the drum, no longer bound, but open, bleeding, pulsing. She stepped into the center of the hall and screamed. The walls cracked, the statues wept tears of blood, and all the candles in the temple exploded into ash. Prachan heard it from the library. He rose, walked through the shattered doors, and stood before her. She turned to him, and the rage faded. Her eyes softened. She cradled the drum like a baby. "They tried to silence me again, but I still have a voice." He stepped forward and knelt. "You do. Then give it to me." In that moment, Prachan understood. She didn't want to destroy the temple. She wanted to be seen within it, to be part of the story it told. Not as a demon, not as a warning, but as a woman who once lived, once gave birth, and was once cast aside by the very faith meant to protect her. He stood, turned to the terrified monks behind him, and said, "It's time. Let the drum speak." The dusk that followed the failed exorcism was not like any dusk before it. It didn't fade gently into evening. It descended, like ash falling from a sky on fire. The sun did not set. it was swallowed. By the time the monks stepped out from the ruins of the meditation hall, the jungle was already unnaturally still. No cicadas, no birds, only the breath of wind weaving through the empty temple corridors, whispering warnings in a language none dared translate. And in that silence, the drum began to beat. Not inside the sealed room, no, from the earth, from beneath the Bodhi tree, from below the villagers' homes, from under the cracked floor of the chanting hall, a rhythm, soft, slow, and far too human. Thum, thum, thum. It pulsed through the ground like a second heartbeat, and with each beat, something stirred beneath the soil. Pra Chan stood in the center of the courtyard, arms slack, face pale. He could feel the vibration in his soles, in his teeth, in the center of his spine. "She's calling them," he whispered. The monks watched him warily, still shaken by the fire, the screaming, the vision of Nok rising from the flame. "What is she calling?" one asked. He turned slowly. Every soul that was buried without peace. Every death ignored. Every child, mother, monk, or stranger whose spirit lies in silence beneath the weight of fear. And then they came. It began at the edge of the village. A farmer ran into the road, raving about a woman crawling out of his well. Another said his grandfather, long dead, was sitting on the porch, not speaking, just weeping. At the temple gates, the dogs began to wail a long, high-pitched chorus of terror that stopped suddenly when the first shadow appeared. A girl, maybe 12, eyes white, feet muddy. She walked barefoot to the base of the temple steps and knelt, head bowed. Then came a man, his body twisted as if broken in a fall. Then a child with no face. Then 3 more, 2 in funeral garments, 1 naked and bleeding from the eyes. They gathered, one by one, in silence, until dozens, maybe more, stood at the edge of the temple, waiting. Not moaning, not attacking, just waiting. "They're not here to harm us," Prachan said. "They're here to listen to her." And as if summoned by his words, Nok stepped forward from the shadows of the Bodhi tree. She was radiant now, terrifying and beautiful. Her feet hovered inches above the ground. In her arms she held the drum, though now it looked less like an instrument and more like a child swaddled in silk. "She buried us in silence," she said. Her voice rolled like thunder muffled by prayer. "So now we rise in sound." She lifted the drum and played it once. Thum. The dead bowed in unison. The monks fell to their knees, many weeping openly. Pra Arun, frail and barely breathing, emerged from his quarters, held up by 2 novices. He looked at the ghostly procession and whispered, "All this time we thought we were the guardians of peace, but we were just the architects of silence." Prachan approached Nok slowly. She did not turn, she simply stood there, holding the heartbeat of every forgotten soul. He bowed and said the words no monk had ever dared speak aloud. "You were once one of us, and we failed you." A long silence. Then she said, "Let my child be buried. Let my name be sung. Let the drum be burned." The wind changed, the air grew still, and the dead, slowly, like smoke dissolving into wind, faded. Not violently, not in agony, but as if for the first time they had been seen. All except one, the little girl at the steps. She did not leave. She looked up at Pra-Chan and smiled, a small, sad smile, then placed something at his feet. A flower, wilted, dead, but placed with love. Then she was gone. That night no one slept, not because they feared the dead, but because they had finally understood them. And as Pra-Chan sat beneath the Bodhi tree, the candle beside him flickering faintly, he whispered her name. Knock. You are not a warning. You are a witness.
The days after the rising of the dead were filled with an unnatural calm. The villagers spoke less. The monks avoided eye contact. Even the jungle seemed to hesitate, as if afraid to rustle the wrong leaf. Only Pra-Chan moved with purpose now, but it was no longer clear if that purpose was his own. He walked the monastery halls barefoot, always barefoot. His footsteps made no sound. His robe never rustled. His eyes, once soft and searching, now held an unsettling stillness, as though they no longer saw what was, but only what had been, and what waited beneath. At dawn, he chanted alone in the courtyard. At noon, he stood beside the sealed drum room, head tilted, lips silently moving. At night, he did not sleep. Instead, he whispered. Not prayers, conversations. The novices were the first to speak their fear. He talks to no one, but then he laughs, or cries, or nods, like he's being answered. I walked past his room and heard a baby crying, but when I looked inside, it was him, alone. One night, I swear I saw 2 shadows, but only one body. Pra-Arun called him again. He was weaker now, his bones showing through his robes, his voice little more than dust. You're too deep, he rasped. You have to come back. Pra-Chan knelt beside him and took his hand. I am not lost, he said calmly. I am shared. He told them her name without fear. Nok. He said it in the shrine, said it in the chanting hall, said it as he washed the feet of the elder monks, as he prepared offerings, as he lit the candles one by one. And every time he said her name, the flame flickered, as if something unseen bowed in recognition. Then came the visions, not in dreams, in waking hours, in water, in mirrors, in the blank wall of his room. He would see her, wrapped in white, face pale, eyes full of something too old for sorrow. She would reach for him, and he would not flinch. He would open his arms and accept her. One night he collapsed in front of the altar. The monks found him trembling, mouth moving, eyes rolled white. They carried him to the back room and laid him down, chanting protection prayers, but he recited them backward, not in defiance, with ease. He's not there, or he's not alone. Pra-Chan awoke at dawn, sat up, smiled gently, and said in a voice that was his and not his, I remember the rope. I remember the silence. I remember holding him while I died. The monks backed away, but one, younger than the rest,
asked through trembling lips, "Are you Nok?" A pause, a sigh, then softly, "We are together. He carries me. I speak through him, because no one listened when I was alive." Pra Arun wept. "This is not how monks live." And Pra Chan answered, "It's how the forgotten live, inside someone who's willing to remember." In the following days, strange things began to happen. The prayer flags, tattered for years, fluttered perfectly even without wind. Crows perched on the roof, unmoving, silent, always watching him. And beneath the Bodhi tree, grass began to grow in a circle, green and vibrant, though no sun reached it. Each night, Pra Chan wrote pages and pages of Nok's story, not from memory, from inside. The ink never smudged, the candles never burned out while he wrote. The ink smelled faintly of blood and rain. The villagers came back, not for blessings, for confessions. They sat before him as he knelt beneath the tree. They spoke of abortions, of betrayals, of the baby left in the woods, of the wife who bled to death without a shroud, of the suicide no one claimed. And every time Pra Chan listened, he held their hands and Nok whispered forgiveness through his mouth. "You were afraid, but you loved them. The spirit saw it. The earth remembers." He no longer ate, no longer drank, and yet he did not grow weak. His presence deepened, as though he was no longer walking through the temple, but had become part of it. One night, a monk asked him, "When will she leave?" He looked to the sky. "She won't. She doesn't want revenge anymore. She wants roots. She wants to be buried in truth." That same night, he walked barefoot to the sealed room one final time. He opened the door. The drum sat waiting, still, quiet, almost as if it was afraid. He knelt before it, placed a kiss on its skin, and whispered, "We won't carry you anymore. It's time." The jungle trembled as though holding its breath. For the first time in decades, the temple bell remained untouched at dawn. No morning chants echoed down the valley. The candles remained unlit. And the silence was no longer sacred, it was strategic. They were preparing to sever Nuk from Pra Chan. And they knew, if they failed, it would not just be his body they lost, it would be the soul of the monastery. The ritual had not been used in over 100 years. It was considered forbidden, not by scripture, but by fear. Because to cast out a spirit that has fused with a body, especially a Tai Hong Tong Klom, is to risk tearing the vessel in two. And more dangerously, if the spirit refuses release, it may choose another host. Pra Arun called the remaining monks together at dusk. They gathered in the old chanting hall, the floor still blackened from the fire Nuk once walked through. The elder monk, now barely more than breath wrapped in saffron cloth, whispered, "This must not be an act of hate. We do not banish her for vengeance. We try to free the boy trapped beneath her weight." No one spoke. Each monk had seen Pra Chan's transformation. Some had seen him cry with Nok's voice. Others had seen his hands write her memories without conscious thought. and one, a novice, had seen him kneel before the cracked drum and bleed from the eyes. They made a decision. The rite would be performed in the temple courtyard beneath the Bodhi tree, not in secret, not with force, but with intention. They would surround him in silence. They would offer no resistance. And Pra Chan himself would be given a chance to choose. At midnight, he emerged from the sealed drum room, barefoot, face expressionless. He knew. He stood beneath the Bodhi tree, still and waiting. The monks encircled him, each carrying a single lotus blossom dipped in black ash, a symbol of mourning for a spirit still tethered to pain. They did not chant, not yet. They waited for Pra Arun to speak. The elder stepped forward, weak but clear. Pra Chan, do you know who walks within you? He nodded. I do. Do you wish to be free of her? A long pause. Then, gently, no. The monks stirred uneasily. Pra Arun stepped closer. Then will you let her go free? This time Pra Chan closed his eyes. His hands trembled, and when he opened them, it was no longer only him speaking. She cannot leave. She has nowhere else to go. She was never laid to rest. The monks began to chant, slow, low, not the usual rhythm, a reversed cadence meant to unwind spiritual knots. Pra Chan fell to his knees. The wind rose sharply. Leaves scattered. The candle flames bent inward toward him. From his mouth came a low growl that morphed into a sob. Then a voice, Nook's voice, cracked through the night air. You will rip me from the only skin that ever held me. Is that your answer, monks? The Bodhi tree shuddered. Its lowest branches blackened instantly, as if struck by grief itself. One of the monks collapsed, nose bleeding. Another dropped his flower and whispered, I can't. I hear a baby crying in my chest. But the chanting continued. Pra Arun placed a trembling hand on Pra Chan's crown. Go where the drum cannot follow, he whispered. Go where your child is waiting. Pra Chan screamed, not in fear, not in pain, but as if torn in half. His body convulsed, his robe soaked with sweat and blood. His hands clawed the dirt, drawing symbols unintentionally. And then, silence. Every candle in the temple blew out. Every voice stopped. Pra Chan collapsed to the ground, still, pale, breathless. The monks rushed to his side. No pulse, eyes closed. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Pra Arun wept quietly. He carried her as far as he could. But then the drum cracked. From inside the sealed room came a sound like thunder under the earth, and with it a child's cry, soft, brief, real. Then silence. When they turned back to Pra Chan, his chest rose, once, twice, and his voice, soft, hoarse, not his, and yet fully his, whispered, She's gone. She's with him now. He slept for 2 days, and when he woke, he remembered everything. Not just her, but himself. The rain returned that night, not in torrents,
but in sheets of silver mist, quiet as breath, steady as grief. It soaked the monastery roofs. It pooled in the cracks between prayer stones, and it washed nothing away. Because now, the temple had remembered what it tried to forget. Fra Chan awoke beneath the Bodhi tree. His robes were damp, and the earth beneath him pulsed faintly, as if something ancient still stirred deep beneath the roots. He felt lighter, but also hollow, like something had been pulled from him, or maybe left behind. He stood slowly and walked barefoot through the rain toward the sealed room. The door creaked open without resistance, and inside, the drum waited. Cracked, fractured, no longer warm, but not yet cold. It looked tired. Fra Chan lit 3 candles, one for truth, one for memory, and one for atonement. He sat before the drum in silence and began to peel away the wrappings, the old cloth, the sacred rope, the layers of forgotten prayer, until the skin beneath was revealed. It was not leather, not animal hide. It was human. The color was wrong, pale, almost translucent, with faint lines like veins beneath the surface. The texture was soft in some places, leathery in others, but unmistakable. And in one corner, near where the rope had once bound it tight, he saw a mark burned into the flesh. A tattoo, a single character, knock. Fra Chan choked on his breath. He reached forward, trembling, and touched the scar with the tip of one finger. It was warm. And then the drum bled. Not violently, not all at once, just a slow trickle from the center, dark red, almost black. The blood pooled at the base, soaking into the floor, tracing the same circular pattern Nock had once drawn in ash. And then the memories returned. Not his, hers. She stood before the monks, weak, barefoot, baby wrapped in cloth, begging them to help. They refused. She wept at the base of the altar, cradling her stillborn child. They called her cursed. She walked into the rain, hung herself from the Bodhi tree, and when they cut her down, they did not cremate her. They did not bless her. They skinned her, bit by bit, while whispering that it was for peace, that it was sacred, that it would silence the wrath. The monks bled her body and boiled her bones. Her skin was stretched across the frame. Blessings were carved into her flesh, not to honor her, but to bind her. They created a drum from her sorrow, a drum they could use to call other spirits, to send the dead to rest, but never her, never the one who screamed into silence. Fra Chan collapsed, not from fear, not from pain, from grief, from the unbearable weight of knowing, of feeling the ritual done not in reverence, but in desperation, in fear disguised as tradition. He knelt before the bleeding drum and whispered, "You were never a demon. You were a mother, and they turned your grief into a tool." The temple walls trembled. Outside, the Bodhi tree dropped its final leaves, and every candle in the shrine guttered low. He stood slowly, his hands still red, and said for the first time, to no one and to all,
This drum is a sin carved into skin. It does not guide spirits, it holds them hostage. That night, he wrapped the drum in white linen, the way a body is wrapped for cremation. He carried it through the temple in silence. No one stopped him. The other monks stood in the shadows, heads bowed, as if they too finally understood. And beneath the storm-gray sky, Phra Chan laid the drum in the fire pit, the same one used for alms incense. He did not chant, he did not pray. He only said, "May this body find rest. May this soul find its child. May this silence no longer be forced." Then he lit the fire and watched it burn. The drum crackled, the linen blackened, and just before the flame reached the center, he heard her voice one final time, "Thank you." Then silence. True silence. The kind that follows forgiveness, not fear. The ashes of the drum still smoldered at the edge of the Bodhi tree. Charred linen curled like dried petals. A thin trail of smoke rose skyward, straight and silent, not dispersing, not drifting, as if the smoke itself carried something home. Phra Chan knelt in front of the fire pit, head bowed. He hadn't moved in hours. He didn't need to, because everything he had to say had already been burned. The temple was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that once came from discipline or prayer. This silence was earned, heavy, sacred, fragile, like a thin layer of glass laid over years of screaming. The monks walked softly. They whispered Nok's name as one would whisper an ancestor, with reverence, with regret. And for the first time in the temple's memory, her name was not followed by fear. It was followed by offerings. Jasmine garlands hung from the Bodhi branches. Small bundles of rice tied with red string were placed on the ground beneath her tree. Children, the same ones who once threw rocks at her shrine, now left drawings beside the roots. A mother holding a baby, a drum cracked in two, a monk with a woman's shadow. But there was still one thing left to do. One ritual not yet completed. The baby, the one she died with, the one who was never named, never cremated, never laid to rest. Phra Chan had searched the monastery records. He'd uncovered an old, unmarked burial report. A single sentence written in trembling script. Stillborn child interred without rites beneath the shrine's eastern foundation. No blessing given. He dug there himself. Hands raw, knees muddy, rain falling steadily, as if mourning. And there, beneath a cracked tile and forgotten roots, he found a bundle of linen the size of a newborn, still intact, still waiting. He carried the child's remains to the Bodhi tree, wrapped it in saffron cloth, placed it in a basket of woven reeds, laid a single lotus flower on top. Then he turned to the monks gathered behind him and said, "We called her a curse. We used her body. But this is how we return it." The ritual began at dusk. They built a new funeral pyre, simple and sacred. the same kind used for elder monks. But this time they burned no incense, only petals, only sandalwood, only paper slips bearing the names of every spirit the temple had ever tried to forget. As the fire caught, Fra Chan chanted, "Let this child walk forward. Let this soul find arms to carry it. Let no drum call him again, because he is already home." The flames danced high, and for one moment, just one, every monk swore they saw a woman standing behind the fire, hair down, arms cradling something unseen, eyes full of tears. She didn't speak. She only nodded. Then she was gone. No screams, no wind, no final haunting, only the fire, only warmth, only peace. Afterward, Fra Chan remained behind. He swept the ashes with his bare hands, placed them in a clay urn, carried them to the river at the edge of the jungle. And as the sun rose over the misted trees, he stepped into the water, up to his knees, and released the urn. It floated for a moment, then sank, softly, completely. When he turned to walk back to the temple, he found Fra Arun waiting at the riverbank. The old monk leaned heavily on a cane, his breathing shallow, but his eyes, the one that still worked, were wet with pride. "You did what none of us could," he whispered. Fra Chan shook his head. "No, I did what she always asked us to do. Listen." Later that day, a single lotus bloomed beneath the Bodhi tree, out of season, alone, bright. The novices called it a miracle. But Fra Chan knew better. It was a thank you.
The rains ended, not with a storm, not with a flood, but with a soft drizzle that faded into dew. The earth drank deeply, the jungle exhaled, and for the first time in generations, the drum did not answer, because it no longer existed. Its ashes now fed the roots of the Bodhi tree. Its blood no longer cried from beneath the floorboards, and the spirit once bound to its skin was finally free. The temple changed in subtle ways, not rebuilt, not repainted, but reopened. The walls were still cracked, the bells still silent, but the silence no longer held fear, it held memory. Monks walked slower now, not out of dread, but out of respect, as if every step might disturb the thin thread between this world and the one just beyond it. Pra Arun died 2 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. His last words were whispered to Pra Chan. "You turned the haunting into a hymn. Let it be sung forever." They cremated him beneath the morning sky, his ashes scattered where the river bends into fog. A white lotus bloomed there 3 days later. The village no longer called Nok a ghost. They called her Mother Nok. Children left her drawings beneath the Bodhi tree. Women whispered her name during childbirth. Elders placed offerings near the old shrine, not to keep her away, but to invite her blessing. And sometimes, in the quiet before sunrise, the villagers would pause in their work, tilt their heads, and swear they heard the soft hum of a lullaby
drifting through the mist. Pra-Chan spoke less. He smiled more. He tended the garden behind the temple. He taught the novices how to sweep with patience. He no longer wore his old robe. Instead, he wore a new one, dyed white, not saffron. When asked why, he said, "Because mourning taught me more than meditation ever could." One morning, before the sun had broken over the trees, he packed a small bag. No food, no books, only a bundle of cloth, and inside it the last petal of the first lotus Nook had ever received. He walked down the temple steps, barefoot as always. The monks watched him go. None stopped him. He did not say goodbye. He only turned once and smiled. He was last seen walking into the jungle, toward the river, toward the mountains. Some say he became a hermit. Others believe he joined the spirits beneath the soil. There are those who swear they see him still, tending to lost graves, lighting incense at forgotten altars, a monk with no shadow. And on certain nights, moonless and windless, when the air grows still and the jungle leans close, travelers passing near the temple say they hear a sound, not loud, not urgent, just a drumbeat. 1, 2, 3, and then silence, as if the spirit is only checking once more that we have not forgotten.